Everybody all right? Oh, I gave you homework and all of a sudden it got quiet, so that's good. Go ahead and take a minute to fill out the first four parts of that. Your group leader name. We only need kind of one sheet per group. If you want to do it individually, that's fine. If you've already started that way, don't worry about it. But just confer with your co-leader to make sure that your numbers match. That would be the main thing. So we're looking for your group name, group leader, average attendance for each gathering, broken down with adults and kids if your group has both. If your group doesn't have both. And again, just kind of, spitball the average. You don't have to be super precise there, but just give us a good ballpark average on a normal day. And then there's kind of two yes or not yet questions there that you can check. And then save the success story part. We'll come to that in a little bit. But as you're doing that, I did kind of in my message on Friday mention one of the things we are going to hopefully do today is kind of share some success stories from this fall and talk about those a little bit, and then give you a chance to kind of annotate those or make some quick notes on those for us if you don't get a chance to share. So that's the story with that. And then we just have a little laundry list of things we're going to go through today. But let me just start with prayer, and then we will kind of dive right in. There's a couple of prayer requests I want to kind of make us aware of as a leader team. The first one is Darren and Andrea Fodor. I don't know, most of you guys recognize that name. They are newer community group leaders. They're in their second year of leading a group in Monroe. They would really love to be here this morning, but Andrea actually at some point this morning is having a surgical procedure at the hospital, and so Darren is there, of course, with her. So we're going to pray for them that just everything goes well there and as planned. And then Jim and Susan Yoon, longtime community group leaders that most of us would recognize those names as well. They have been in the C.S. Lewis ownership seminar that is hosted by the Kairos Adult Fellowship class. And Jim and Susan have invited a non-Christian friend to be here specifically for today and for the kind of the gospel presentation that they're doing up there in that class right during this hour. So we will kind of pray for that class, especially this morning, and for Jim's friend. Hopefully they were able to make it. I didn't get visual confirmation on that, but we'll pray anyway that they are hopefully here and God is speaking to them this morning regardless. And then Judy Mahalko in the back row there is having a stress test, cardiology stress test done this week, so we'll pray for her as well. It's never it's one of the big ones where they inject you with the special stuff. So we'll pray for that as well. And it is really hot in here. So David, do you mind just crank that thermostat in the back corner down as far as it'll go? I don't know if it'll do anything or not, but we'll cross our fingers and pray that it does. So I know it's that time of year. So let's pray, and then we'll cruise on through. So God, thank you for this morning, just the chance to kind of sit face to face and kind of share and reflect on this fall term. We're just grateful for all that you have done and are continuing to do in our groups and in our people and our church family this fall and through this just this great series from Philippians 4. We thank you for Steve and his preparation and the other speakers as well that you have used to communicate your word to us this fall. And then we just also lift these special requests from this team of Darren and Andrea and of Judy and Jim and Susan and their friend, that you would just be working in each of these situations. You know even infinitely better than we do all of the specifics and particulars of the medical things and the spiritual needs that are at work in these lives. And so just use us as a team and as a church family to support these, and that we just pray specifically for Jim's friend that you would draw him to yourself, maybe even this morning, that he would see something different in our church, maybe that he's seen before, that is just a reflection of you and your truth and character that we hope that he sees. And so be with us as we kind of spend this time together debriefing and just strategizing about how you're using us to guide and shepherd people to be more like Jesus. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. Okay, so first thing I wanted to do with you guys this morning is just talk about this new approach to baptism that we kind of rolled out this fall. So let me just see by show of hands, is anybody in the room kind of currently walking and shepherding someone through the baptism process for this month, for November? Matt and Renee are. Anybody else? I know a few people that are not here in the room this morning. So let me just a little kind of pop quiz time. So what is your role in the baptism process as a community group leader? Shout it out. Somebody get us going. Answer questions. All right.
Walk with them.
Walk with them. Yep. Encouragement. Good. All good things.
Bring it to light.
What's that?
Bring it to light.
What do you mean by that?
Bring it to light to show them that might be the next step that they want to consider in their walk.
Absolutely. Yep. Just kind of starting that conversation. Yep.
Help them craft their story.
Help them craft their story. Yep, for sure. That's part of it. Any other?
Help them understand what that means and why they would do it.
Right.
Absolutely. Yep. So there's that understanding of what baptism is and what it maybe is not. So in there were some 3 or 4 posts on Realm earlier in October that kind of laid out the strategy for shepherding someone through the baptism process. So let's just kind of review a little bit of that. So as the church has grown, right, we know that the best way to guide people toward next steps is through relationships with somebody that they know, right? We can make an announcement from the platform and say, hey, there's going to be a baptism class, after the service. If you're interested, come show up, and then we'll help you get baptized. And when we do that, right, some people come, not as many as maybe could or should, right? But a few come. But how much better would it be if actually we were discipling kind of in one-on-one relationships or two-on-one relationships, people from within community life toward this next step of baptism? And so we'll kind of talk about that a little bit more in what it means for community groups in a second. But in terms of the mechanics of the process, there are kind of 3 things that I want you to remember. So if you want to take notes, you can take notes on the back page of your handout because you're going to give me that top sheet. So, but there are basically 3 things you need to remember. The first thing is helping people understand what baptism is. All right. So in the past we had, and we'll still continue to have the baptism seminar, right, on a few Sundays before, where somebody can come and get. Amy, here's one for you. Sorry. Take that together, and they can come in, and one of the pastors and staff will kind of walk through a quick teaching on what baptism is and what it is not. And we've actually now empowered and equipped you guys to have the exact same information that takes place in that class, right? It's a double-sided sheet that goes through some scripture passages of what baptism is and what it isn't. And so step 1 would just be helping the person who's interested understand what baptism is. And so that means just, hey, let's set up a time. Maybe it's after community group. Maybe it's before community group. Maybe it's grabbing coffee in the cafe, on a Sunday morning between services, or some other time during the week. And let's just walk through that sheet together. Answer any questions that people have. A lot of people have, kind of preconceived notions or conceptions about what baptism is or how it should be done. And so you are equipped now to kind of walk through that process. It's one of those things that you kind of get better and more confident as you have done it. And so if maybe this round nobody in your group or in your circle of influence was making a choice to be baptized, just grab that sheet and kind of walk through it yourself, or grab a friend or somebody, a spouse, and walk through that sheet and just help get feedback on how, did I cover all the things right? Was that clear? Did I go too fast, too slow? Just so you're confident talking with somebody about what baptism is, maybe even including your personal experience with that moment as part of that as well. So that's step 1, is the understand. Step 2 that you need to remember is help them to write. All right. Now, as culture has changed, right, writing is something that is less and less common practice, right, for everyone, like it maybe was in the past. And so what it means to write a testimony is, people have different levels of anxiety and difficulty in that process, depending on their background, right? And so we provided in that baptism packet that you have also access to, 6 questions that we use to help people formulate their testimony. Again, that's for anybody across the church, right? All you need to do is help get information of some sort that relates to each of those 6 questions, right? The main thing you can do is help us get each of those questions answered, right? So lots of times if we just have somebody go off and write their testimony and then send it back to the church, they'll talk about, lots of different things about their childhood and growing up and church and, all of the, how they serve here at the church and all these things. And they get to the end and there's not anything about Jesus in their testimony, right, at all. Now, does that mean that they don't know Jesus? Not necessarily, right? It could just mean that they never understood that needs to be included as part of what they talk about when they just pass that back to Grace, when they give their testimony. Or it might mean that actually, they have never really connected the dots of what Jesus did on the cross and how that personally needs to apply to their life. And so that gives you, as their shepherd and their leader, the opportunity to have that conversation and to ask those questions and to help connect those dots with them and maybe bring them to a saving understanding of grace through faith for the first time. And then use that to then springboard their testimony and baptism. So the most helpful thing you guys can help us do is to get responses for all 6 of those questions in some way. It doesn't have to be this crafted narrative with transitions and clear paragraphs that is ready to be read from the platform on Baptism Sunday. There's a whole team of writers and editors that will help craft that narrative structure for you or for them. All you need to do is just get the nuts and bolts, the raw information, and then it can be adapted from there. So that might be just a list of bullet points. If you've got somebody who just writing in sentences and paragraphs is not something that they feel super strong with, but they can give kind of bullet points for each of those questions. Take that. That's great. We'll craft that into that story. Or maybe they're more of a verbal person than they are a writer person. And actually you could take out your phone and just hit record and have that conversation where they're just talking to you about their responses. And then you can take that audio file, send that to us, and then we can process and extract what we need from that as well. So helping them to write that might involve a couple of back and forths, right? So that's why we want, enough time to do that well, where we start the process early, and then you have that direct contact and that direct feedback where you can help people do that. And then part 3 is celebrate. So if someone from your community group is getting baptized, that should be a big deal to your community group, right? Because it's one of the most exciting things that we do. And so you want to get your group involved in that Sunday experience for that person. So maybe that means, hey, as a group, those that are available are going to huddle up and pray over the person before they head back to be baptized, kind of in the one of the side hallways or kind of an empty room. Maybe you as the group leader want to be kind of right there, kind of in the back area as one of the first people that they hug as they kind of come out of that process, and then have your group invited to the reception and figure out a way to kind of celebrate that together because it's a big step for people that have not done that yet. And so helping people understand what baptism is, helping people to write the framework for their testimony, and then celebrate their actual Baptism Sunday is the role that we have as community group leaders and shepherds to help people through that process. All right? Now, that leads to kind of another question that's not on your sheet, but let's kind of show by raising hands. Does your group have a group member who has been a follower of Jesus for 3 years or less? 3 years or less. Wow, you guys are all on the wings. I don't know if that says anything about 3. And again, it might be 4, you don't know, but 3 years or less. So raise your hands again. Let's just kind of look around. So that's maybe half, 40%, right, of us groups represented in the room. So that brings up a dynamic of that I want us to kind of think about that ties back to something we talked about at the September Worship and Vision Night, and that is our community groups, becoming sort of these isolated holy huddles where everybody in them has been following the Lord for a long time. Now, that's not necessarily a negative thing, right? In some ways we would expect and want that to be the case, right? Because people that are motivated to be in groups, right, are people that are going to be serious about their faith and have been following the Lord for a while. But if our group stays in that environment where we have nobody new coming in who is newer in their faith, then we're never going to get that opportunity to talk about baptism, right? Most likely, because most people will have done that before they got to our group. And we're going to miss that kind of dynamic that comes when there's somebody new and hungry to learn and to know what it means to follow Jesus who's sitting there with us, right? And so that links into this other idea we talked about back in September of creating a culture of invitation in our groups, right? Where one of our goals was that our groups are open spaces where our group members and ourselves are actively inviting new people in to our group experience. And so I asked you that question kind of to get a sense of how have we done with that this fall? Have we as a group invited somebody into our group that didn't initiate that on their own, right? So I'm not talking about people that kind of, were looking for a group this fall and then they reached out to us, right? I'm talking about, hey, did we actively reach out to a neighbor or a friend or someone that we've seen here at church who is in our neighborhood, in our space, and actively kind of approached and tried to recruit them into our group, not steal them from another group, right? But bring them into a group if they are not in a group at all right? Because that's a value that we have to keep kind of holding up. And so you might say, well, hey, I have no idea. I would love to do that, but I don't know. Like, I don't know anybody that lives near me. I don't know anybody that needs a group. If you're in that case, come to me and we will help you find people, right? There are people that are living all around all of our groups that could be in groups, and we want to set you up to be those inviters that bring them in, and then and help them to then grow together. So that's kind of the overview of the baptism process and how that connects into this culture of invitation. Any questions about that? Any kind of stories of invitation from this fall that anybody wants to share? Put you on the spot. Dave.
We, I was going to say accidentally, but obviously providentially ran into a woman at McDonald's after the concert last week. 2 weeks ago, was it?
Well, last
Yeah. And it turns out she's new to the church, and so we asked her, are you involved in the community group? She goes, no, not yet. I'm thinking about it. And so we had a nice little chat with her, and we thought that would be the end of it. But then last Sunday, we went to service, and after the service, she got a tap on the back. It was the same woman sitting right behind us, and so we got a chance to reinforce that. So hopefully, and she's not living near us, but just always looking for an opportunity to plug somebody into a group somewhere.
Absolutely.
Weston, whoever's Weston, looking for somebody.
It's good. Good. Joan, yeah.
Even though the members may have been Christians, followers of Christ, longer, many of them, or a few of them, are from different denominations and so have a lot of questions. And we had a discussion early on what baptism is and is not.
Sure.
Which was a good discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, Joan brings up a good point in that, as a church with great diversity in it, right? We have people from lots of different church backgrounds where baptism means different things and looks different depending on those traditions. And so we want to help people understand, what is the kind of, from our viewpoint, the most biblical based baptism process, and help them take that step, even if it meant, being baptized after they've been baptized as an infant, right? And I gave you some points about how you might approach that specific conversation that does come up a lot of, I was baptized as an infant, right? Do I need to be baptized again? Should I be baptized again? Is that right? Is that wrong? And so helping us to be prepared for that conversation with group members, because somebody may have been baptized, 30, 40 years ago, but that if that was done as infant baptism, we would love to help them have a baptism that was by their own choice as well, even now. And if that means adapting how we do things on Sunday morning, then we'll do that to make that possible for anyone. Yep, Valerie.
Just an example of how the church used the term can plug people into community groups. One woman that came to the bereavement group, they decided that the next step for her would be a community group. So she reached out to me because our group was all women. The process doesn't work overnight like the case with McDonald's. It took her almost a year to come, but you can't give up on people. You have to still be in particular person, her husband committed suicide, so she was really, really hurting. And so finally, just a few weeks ago, she came.
Yep.
So now it's, the next step of keeping her engaged and supported.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
it's work.
Yep.
It's work. It doesn't happen
Sure.
sometimes overnight.
Yep. Chris?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges in reaching out also is when you have a community group that you think is at the limit in terms of the number of persons you want.
Yep.
Then your members and yourself will actively look for people to recruit.
Sure. Yep.
So I think that is something that we need to address.
Yep.
Okay, go and still recruit. We'll split the group in two and we'll start.
Yep.
But we need to have a plan in place to address that. Because
Absolutely. Yep.
where my group is right now, we've had new persons added over the last 2 sessions. Like one
Yep.
person here, one person there. And
Sure.
we're kind of feeling like we don't want any more right now.
Yep, yep. Yeah, and that's Chris brings up also a great point. If you are feeling like you don't have the room to invite anyone else, right, then you have done everything right, because that means you've created the environment that is now ready to have a discussion about what's next, right, for our group. Because kind of like Steve was talking about, if you in the sermon today, like the church was at the point where we couldn't fit any more people in the building, right? We were turning away people in the parking lot because there was just literally no place else to put people inside. And so we had to do something, right? And that was a long plan of years, right, in order to then build that capacity, right? But if we're at that point where we can't invite, then we have to start making some changes. And that might be, okay, we've got to figure out who can we set up as an apprentice leader to then take some of this group and launch as a multiply group from our group. Now, somebody's not going to be able to lead a group perhaps well overnight, right? If they don't have experience in that already. And so it might take Chris and myself, 6-9 months a year of training and building and pouring into an individual who is going to now become the next iteration of this new group. But that's what we want to be doing, right? And I know there are lots of our groups that are at that stage where we have to start thinking about, okay, what is next, right? What we have going on is great, and we want to maintain that excellence in that environment, but at the same time, we can't invite. And if we can't invite, then we can't fully live out kind of what Jesus calls us to do and be, right, in Scripture, if we're, again, kind of isolated in this great holy huddle that is awesome, right? But again, is not having the impact that it could have, right, if we had just a little more room. So that's great. Other success stories kind of from this fall, not necessarily baptism connected, but are there things that have happened in your group this fall that just kind of make you excited as a group leader about kind of what's going on? Any stories of kind of life change or life transformation that are kind of being birthed out of your groups? And again, I would love for you to jot some of these things down on this top sheet and tear that off and give that to me, because one of the things, again, that we talked about in the fall kickoff was this idea of sharing stories of what's going on in groups, right? For many people, community groups are this black box where they just don't understand what happens there and why they would want to be a part of it. And so we have to be creative in sharing with our church family, inside and outside even as well, in the community, stories of what it looks like to be in a community group. So on Realm, hopefully you saw last week after Veterans Day there, the picture post that Dan and Glory Bulkley posted of their group, right, just huddled around a cake for kind of Veterans Day. Both Dan has a military veteran background, and so they were kind of just taking that moment, right, and celebrating that as a group. And when you saw that snapshot of their group, right, what did you see? You saw older, you saw younger, you saw African American, you saw white, you saw Indian, you saw this whole mixture of people, right, that I didn't even know were in their group, right? And I'm in charge, right? So if we flash that picture, right, on the church Facebook account, or we weave that into some announcement or some communication about community groups, now somebody might see that picture and say, oh, there's people that are like me that are in these community groups, like, and they're having cake. I like cake. Let me figure out what this is, right? Because sometimes we can say all those things, right? But again, that picture says so much more than what we could ever say, because it just shows the joy and the love for one another. It's just so evident, right, in that group huddled around in that picture. So what else is going on that you guys want to share, Chris?
So in addition to the baptism, when you sent out information, you also spoke about membership.
Yep.
Right, and we had some conversation in our group about, what does membership mean, and
Yep.
why should you be a member? So there's one new person who joined the group this session. She's been coming to BlackRock on that year, and she has signed up. She's gone through the process. But there was another person who had been coming to BlackRock for like 8 years. They were a part of the group even before I was a part.
Okay. Yeah.
And they said, okay, this sounds
Yep.
pretty good. And they also went through the process
Yep.
to become a member.
Yeah, that's
So
great.
it,
Yep.
it was great.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Pete. Yeah.
Yeah, we had 4 new group members this year, and we've one of the things that that was a lot of fun was one of our long-term group members who hasn't been able to join us for a while because of health problems had an issue where her garage was just full of stuff, and she's very unstable on her feet, so we went up to her place, emptied out the garage, and a shed that was filled with stuff. 5 carloads of stuff to the dump, and now she can take her car into the garage and doesn't have to walk outside during the winter.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Grace.
As you know, Dave and Marie are moving. So this past Wednesday, they asked me if I could leave the group. So I did for the first time. That was a big deal. But we also, as a group, will be helping them, with their move. Some of us will be, assisting
Sure,
them with that. And then the other thing we're doing is, my husband also teaches and preaches at an elderly home. And for our Love Works Day, we went over there and helped a lot of the elderly people declutter their rooms and apartments. And so now we're getting calls on a regular basis to, can your group come and help me take stuff out of my storage and blah, blah, blah. So now we're like, okay, I guess this is becoming a regular thing.
thing, yeah.
So in a way, it's good though, because it gives us sort of a project
Yep.
to do together.
Yep.
And haven't really posted any pictures or anything like that, but I
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
that's a good idea. I
Yep.
haven't thought of that,
Yep.
just to encourage other people.
Sure. Yeah. Kelly.
It was really neat to see that the group became smaller groups too, that they wanted to do lunch together, dinner with each other, guys and gals. I mean, guys
Yeah.
having coffee together, because the ladies are easier to coordinate to do fun things, but especially a lot of the guys. Which having guys in my group is always a bigger struggle,
Yeah.
But they rallied, we're doing Friendsgiving next
There you go.
Sunday after
Right.
church at someone's house, because
Yeah.
they want to do it all together.
Yeah.
And that was their spurring, not mine, which was great.
Yep. Yep. Brian, why don't you share just a little bit about kind of the language dynamic that has developed in your guys' group this fall?
Oh yeah. So what I love is I really wanted our group to be diverse, and so one thing that we're really excited about is I would say almost half, 1, 2, 3, about 5 or 6 have speak Spanish, and so what's really unique about that is one of our members, her husband, is Spanish speaking. He's not very fluent in English. He can speak it, but for a community group dynamic, it's really great because he can speak in his language for what he's feeling, what God's moving in him, and in his own tongue, and half the group can understand, and then they tell us kind of, explain it to us, which
Yep.
is great. But I love the fact that we have that kind of diversity in there. He can feel comfortable to come and be part of it, and feel like he's not an outsider trying to be part of it, but he can actually be part of our group.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. Really cool. Valerie.
Our group is located in Bridgeport, and we adopted the Bridgeport Police Department as our prayer partner. The department has experienced 2 officer suicides, is facing a huge lawsuit of police brutality. And so we decided that that would be where we would focus our prayers. This has been told to one of the captains, who I understand been told that the chief is aware that there's a group of ladies praying. And so now we have to decide what that next step is.
Yep.
How to perhaps, bridge that relationship a
Yeah.
little closer.
Yep. Yep. As Valerie said that, it just kind of triggered in my mind. Speaking of Bridgeport, so if you look at the kind of the church guests, like the guest households who came to BlackRock for the first time in this past calendar year, the number of households from Bridgeport was equivalent to the number of households from Fairfield, okay? Like dead even, right, in numerically. But if you look at the number of community groups that we have in Fairfield, and you look at the number of community groups that we have currently in Bridgeport, right, there's a big difference there, right? And so if you know of individuals that would be interested in leading a group that meets in Bridgeport, or someone that lives in Bridgeport that would could be leading or hosting a group and is not currently engaged that way, I would love to know who they are, because I'm actively searching as well, but just kind of broaden that out to you guys and anyone that you know of or hear about that would be good fit for this team, or maybe they're not ready today, but we can set up a plan to move them in that progression soon. Would be fantastic. So let me just kind of those are all great, and I'm sorry we don't have more time to kind of dig into any others, but jot them down. I would love to follow up with you and kind of hear more on those success stories, and again help us use those to communicate with our church family. You know, sometimes we know, like when we're helping clean out somebody's storage unit, like we're not doing it so that we can take a selfie at the end, right, and then post that and pat ourselves on the back. That feels really awkward to us, and I understand that, right? When we have, even as a staff, when we're sharing, quote unquote success stories, there's an element of it that just feels like it's not what it's about, right? But again, just help remember that the story is not about us, right? The story is about who's not yet engaged, and how that story can hook them into becoming part of something that will help them grow in ways that they're not yet stepping out to do. And so, we're not looking to raise ourselves up and kind of pat ourselves or even the church on the back. What we're looking to do is just show people and give them that inside look at what happens in groups, right? Because God does so many amazing things, right, in our groups, and we want as many people as possible to experience that for themselves. My success story for our group, I'll kind of selfishly share because it involves something else I wanted to talk about, and that is Realm. So let me see if I can get this reconnected here. So one of the things that I really had as a goal for our group down in Stamford this fall term was to kind of make some strides in developing a commitment to a lifestyle of community as opposed to an event-based mentality of community, right? And you remember the difference between those two things, right? An event-based mentality is when, hey, it's time for community group, so I show up, I check my box that I was there, and then I leave, and I don't think about community group or see anybody from community group or talk about community group, right, until same time next week, and then I go back and do that again, right? That's an event-based mentality where I think of my group as an event that I go to. As opposed to a lifestyle of community where, yes, I go to that gathering, that event, and then that just is the springboard that launches into all the connections and all the things that happen throughout the week from that. And so one of the great tools that we have, right, to help our groups have a lifestyle of community is Realm, okay? And so I just want to kind of show you how our group has been using Realm this term. And one of the first things you'll notice is that I am using my phone, right? And I'm not using my laptop to do this, okay? And that's on purpose, right? Because most of us, again, it's not universally true, but most of us spend more time technologically connected to our phone than we do to our email, right? So if we're only utilizing Realm as something that sends us email, right, then we are never going to use the full benefit of what Realm could be. So what I'm showing you is what the news feed for our group looks like on the Realm Connect app. So if you are a group leader and you do not have the Realm Connect app on your phone yet, I would love to change that for you, okay? I'm not talking about the BlackRock Church app. I'm not talking about brc.church. I'm talking about the Realm Connect app, which has a icon that looks like this. I would make it bigger, but I can't. Realm Connect app, right? That is the native app for the Realm platform, all right? So if you are logged in through the app, then you will see your your news feed, right? And you have a lot of other functionality there as well. You can set up events for groups. You can send messages within Realm. You can do online giving there. You can even look people up and see some of their contact information depending on how their privacy settings are set up. So again, all that you would miss if you're just using Realm as reading emails that it generates for you automatically. So in our group, you can see we use Realm to set up events for our weekly gatherings, right? I can put in, we have 2 different houses that we meet at. We alternate, but it's not a predictable pattern of where we're going to be depending on their schedule. So I can put the address, either 22 Dan or 159 Colonial, so people can go back and see where our group meeting is going to be that day, right? You can put notes there, the time is there. So it's great for those events, and if we do extra things, we can obviously schedule those as extra events as well. But what I wanted to show you, actually besides that, is just, so here's a post I created to start the conversation about baptism, right? This is back in October, right? Baptism's coming up. Hey, let me just start that conversation. Now, because we've been talking about something on Realm prior to our group gathering, right? When we gather on Sunday, we have a starting point that's already defined for us. I can go easily say, hey, everybody, catch that post I put on Realm about baptisms. Let's talk about that for a second. Is anybody interested in that? Has anybody thought about that? And go from there. But then the other thing that I challenged our group to do was say, okay, can we take every day between this group gathering and the next group gathering and have some sort of activity on Realm every day? Just throwing that as a challenge to the group, just to see if we can do it, right? And what I found that started happening was people started, again, sharing things that allowed us to stay connected across the week, right? So here we had our gathering Sunday, right? The next day, Eddie posted about stress in a doctor's appointment and an MRI that he was having, right? So he had talked about that, right, at our group meeting. But again, Monday morning, I probably would have forgotten about that, right, to pray for that or think about that, except Eddie popped up and said, hey, I have a doctor's appointment this morning at 8. This is going to be the result of this MRI. Boom. That pops up on my phone. If I'm, getting ready for work or if I'm at my desk, I see that. I can pray for that then, and I can remember to maybe I don't have time to do it right then, but at some point at lunch or later in the evening, I can circle back in with Eddie. I can post something there to show that we are tracking, right? Karen posted a different prayer request. Gabby posted some reminders that she heard in a podcast that she was listening to on the way to work, right? So now we're not just sharing prayer requests, we're also sharing things that are edifying to build up from other truth, right? Then we had the post about our next weekly gathering. Somebody else posted about, hey, I hope you're enjoying this Thursday morning. I recently discovered John Piper's Look at the Book series. Here's a link to these videos that John Piper has hundreds of that explain Scripture in creative ways. And so I found kind of a quote that was good for me. Some morning reminders. We started talking about Kanye. And then we found this video that I don't know if you saw, but I just thought I'd show you. So that was Evie's first sip of Coke. You can find it on YouTube if you want it for your own group. All right, first in her life, right? That's kind of what does all of us.
Get to that thread.
What's that?
For your thread for your group, like for the post.
If you click on find a post that has been posted from your group, and then just click on your group name at the top of that post, and it should pull up just the feed for your group.
Also, Caleb, I had to tell people in our group to turn on their notifications.
Yep.
It doesn't automatically do it when
Right.
when you get the app. You have to go on there and say you want it, if you want it persistent.
Yep.
Or if you want it temporary.
Yep.
Where it shows up once or it keeps showing up.
Yep, yep.
It's like different
There,
things.
yes. So what Grace is referring to there, it's a blessing and a curse, right? Realm can notify you to death, right? It can email you to death, right? And that's probably how you're experiencing it, right? Which is probably not the best, right? Because you've not gone into your settings and said, hey, I want to know everything about my community group, but I only want to know some things about these other groups. Or I don't want notifications, the little numbers to pop up next to the app for some apps, but for Realm I do, right? Because I want that instant notification when something is going down. So you have to figure out what works for you. But the point is, it's a really cool tool that we can use to easily maintain that that dialogue in our group across the week, right? And then because it keeps, we can scroll back through that on our last session, and then we can kind of look at what God has done, right? Remember when we prayed for that MRI back in October? Well, now it's the end of November. Let's check in on that again, or let's praise God for all the things that He's done kind of in these last 3 months as we scroll through our news feed together. Brian.
It looks like we can add our own people to our group.
Yep.
Can we remove people? I have a lot of random people.
Great question. You shouldn't be able to remove people from your group. You can add them, and we want you to add them, right? As you have new people, add them to your group for sure. I don't think you have the ability to remove them, and if you do have that ability, don't use it, right? Because we want to make sure that anyone that we remove from a group, we want to put into an administrative group where we can then go back to them later and say, hey, we saw you used to be in a community group. What happened? Let's figure out how we can get you into a group now.
So email you if we want
So
them
yes,
removed?
yep, email me or Sarah, and then we'll remove them and put them in that group. Renee.
Can I mention at one point it was remarking attendance, and I was unable to use this function in our group. I don't
Okay,
know if
yep,
it's separate.
sure.
But I don't know if anybody else has.
Yeah, great question. So there is an attendance function, and that's a great segue because we are going to explore the attendance function in the winter term. All right, so hang on to that. We'll figure out the bugs with that. But yeah, so you can also take attendance for your group. So if you have a large group, and you may not have that visual memory of who was there, who wasn't there, right? The Barnes have a really large group. If we mark attendance, then we can easily see the patterns looking back of like, okay, yeah, it's been 3 weeks and so-and-so's not been here. That's unusual. In fact, we can even set up Realm to remind you automatically if someone's not there for 3 weeks in a row. And then you can reach out to them and say, hey, everything okay? Like, I feel bad that, I haven't noticed that you weren't there, but let's catch up. Let's figure, anything we can do for you. Let's talk to see what's going on. So more on attendance coming in the winter term. Grace, yeah.
One other thing I've been asking my group to do is to just click on the heart, when I post something, just to click on the little heart, just so I know they saw it.
Yeah.
Like I say to them, you don't have to respond or
Yep.
anything, but I just sometimes think like, did anybody even see it?
Sure.
It's
Yep.
like,
Yeah.
just click the heart, please.
Yep. Yep.
So
Absolutely.
Kind of like a like
Right.
on Facebook.
It's like a like.
Exactly.
on Facebook.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. So you'll if you're not using it yet, even just for yourself, right? Take your group out of the equation. If you as an individual are not using the Realm app to keep track of what's going on in the church, then you're also missing out, right, on that. Because again, we all have those kind of down times in life where we most of us fill that void with something, right? So if I'm in a line at the grocery store waiting to check out, and I'm not going to read Us Weekly, right, and then put it back on the shelf, right? I'm going to pull out my phone 9 times out of 10, right? And so I could be reading the news, I could be checking the weather, or I could be checking in with my group, right? And just reminding myself of, what was going on? Like Eddie had this MRI, Karen was stressed about this thing at work. Take 2 minutes and pray for those things, even right there in the line at the grocery store, or just all those other places of space in life where we fill them with something. We can fill them with things that are productive and leading our group even when we're not together. All right. I put a question on there about the prayer prompts, so give me your feedback on that. That was something new in the discussion guides and leader guides this fall, was a section of kind of 3 or 4 bullet points connected to prayer topics for the week that we were there. So if you utilize those, let me know. If you didn't yet, let me know that as well. And then I attached for you an article that I shared with some of our newer community group leaders already called Beyond Prayer Requests. That's just for you to take home and take a look at. It's got some unique, interesting kind of thoughts to that whole idea of praying together in a group and how we can do that. in life-giving ways as opposed to kind of just the same routine ways that we classically think about it. So that's for your benefit down the road. And then the last thing I just want to kind of mention, we're wrapping up the winter term this week. And then the winter term, we're wrapping up the fall term. The winter term begins January 26th, okay? That is a long time, right? That's 2 months, right? Basically, the way with Christmas and Thanksgiving and New Year's obviously in between there. But as I also mentioned on Friday, don't let January 26th be the next time you see or talk to your group members, right? That's way too long to kind of go without any checking in. I know we're all kind of tired at this point, right? I'm right there with you of like, after I get through this session tonight, like it's gonna be nice not to have to think about writing questions for you and or leading discussions for my group for a little bit, right? But that doesn't mean that I have no responsibility to those people for 2 months, right? So again, Realm is a great way to do that, right? We can just throw something up there every few days and check in, let people react. We can look for creative things to post there ourselves. More videos of kids drinking Coke or things with a little more spiritual meat to them than that as well. But utilize Realm for that. Some other ideas would be, sit together in a worship service. That is one thing that our group has done that is just really changes the dynamic. You just see people in a different light, right, when you sit together in a worship service. And again, now when you kind of get that glimpse over and see somebody's face and how they're reacting to singing and reacting to worship, some of the backstory of what is going on in their world, right? It colors things differently when we were in that corporate worship service together. So, find a Sunday and say, hey, we're just going to split the difference and go to the 10 o'clock service and we're all going to sit together. Or if that doesn't work out, say, hey, this Sunday we're going to grab coffee between the second and third services. Just, huddle up over in this corner by the bell and we'll hang out there for, 5-10 minutes and just say hello. All those things. Look for ways, obviously Christmas parties and caroling, and there's plenty of other big events that you can think about around this time of year as well. But even just the small things of, hey, let's just hang out by the bell in the cafe for 10 minutes between services, that goes, great lengths of helping your group stay connected as you head into January. I don't have a ton of details about it today, or I would have given you more information, but in the months of February and March, we will be doing a church-wide devotional initiative called the Red Letter Challenge that ties into kind of the red letter sayings and teachings of Jesus from the Bible. So that will also dovetail into our community group experience in the months of February and March. I don't know exactly what that will look like yet. The preaching will tie into that as well during those weeks. And so we'll be kind of in that same format of sermon length, but our discussions actually might be less about the sermon and more about the material that comes with the Red Letter Challenge resources. So stay tuned for more on that as we get into December and January. But that's sort of the game plan for the winter, which will take us right up in to the beginning of April. So it'll go through the missions conference, which is late March, and then right to the beginning of April. So it seems weird to call the end of April or beginning of April the winter term, but it will be. Brian,
That's
question?
going to be my question. Do we have dates for when winter starts and finishes and when spring starts and finishes?
Yeah, so winter will finish around April 3rd or 4th, something like that. So it's a big, healthy winter block. And then spring term will start right after Easter and go into the beginning of June. Similar to like we did last year. We mentioned Love Works Day a few minutes ago. Love Works Day, I don't have the date right in front of me, but I do know that we are moving it earlier into the spring. So I think it's early May, if I remember correct. To hopefully kind of take it a little bit off some of the busier, hectic time of June when weddings and all kinds of other things tend to happen. So graduations, yeah, exactly. So that will become a little bit earlier in the year, and obviously more information on how that connects to groups as well. All right, I think we made it. Let me just remind you, you can leave that top sheet for your group with me. Take that prayer article and read it this afternoon or some other time. And any other questions